Hello and welcome to ISEP's Oceania Pre-Departure Orientation, which will cover the countries of Australia, Fiji, and New Zealand. My name is Jo Moley, and I am ISEP's Student Services Officer for the UK, Ireland, and most importantly for this presentation, Oceania. Thank you so much for being here today. This webinar will last about 30 to 45 minutes and cover the following topics: culture and daily life, academic matters, health and safety, tips for before you go, and tips for keeping in touch with ISEP and your family. To get started, we'll talk about life in Oceania. First, Australia. Australian culture is known for its multiculturalism. Australia was first inhabited by Indigenous Aboriginal peoples and later vastly populated by the British. However, following liberal immigration policies just after the Second World War, Australia's population is now vibrantly multicultural and composed of people from at least 210 different nationalities. Due to relative geographical proximity, many of these people hail from Asia originally, although there are also significant Greek, Italian, and Turkish populations, among others. You will find the student population to be likewise diverse. Therefore, it may be difficult to precisely define what Australian culture truly is. Not surprisingly, you will find that values of egalitarianism and tolerance are of the utmost importance in Australia. Australians are known as generally friendly, good-natured, and willing to give you a fair go. Fijian culture is also known for being extremely multicultural. Fijian citizens include Fijian of people of Indian, Chinese, Pacific Islander, and European ethnicity, among others. In fact, Fiji is often referred to as the cultural melting pot of the South Pacific. Fijian indigenous society is very communal, with great importance attached to the family unit and the village and the vanua, or land. This social structure reflects Fiji's strong Polynesian influence. They developed within Fijian society long before the arrival of the Europeans, and so are well rooted in Fijian society today. In Fiji, you will get used to Fiji time. This expression describes the pace of daily life in Fiji. While you can expect important events such as lectures to begin on time, a more casual attitude is generally applied to other daily social activities. Always remember that this slowness is not slothful intention. It is just the way that things are done. Try relaxing and embracing the laid-back Fijian lifestyle while you're there. If you are invited to a village or Fijian homestead, wear modest clothing and take off your hat. It's recommended that women wear a skirt or sarong over their pair of shorts, and men should wear a sarong as a show of respect. If in doubt, always feel free to ask someone about the appropriate attire and protocol. Also, if you're invited to drink kava, don't ask, just do it. Kava, or Yagona, is considered the national drink. In the past, where it was only used in traditional ceremonies, it is now used as a social drink in most every occasion. Language in Fiji is something you might have been wondering about. English is the official language of instruction in Fiji, but Fijian and Hindustani are also widely spoken. You are highly encouraged to learn some basic Fijian. The most important word to know is bula, which is a way to say hello, good day, goodbye, how are you, and much more. Following the theme, New Zealand is also a very multicultural society. New Zealand was first inhabited by Indigenous people, the Polynesian Maori people, who now represent about 1 in 7 New Zealanders. And later, New Zealand was vastly populated by the British and other Europeans, often called Pakeha. Despite a past marked by racial discrimination and marginalization of the Maori people by European New Zealanders, the nation has worked to rectify those wrongs and today takes pride in being described as a bicultural nation based on the partnership between these two main groups. Both English and Maori are official languages of New Zealand. Meanwhile, New Zealand's population continues to grow more and more vibrantly multicultural, with residents hailing from China, the Pacific Islands, Croatia, and many other places. While in New Zealand, try to make a sincere effort to meet and get to know the locals. You will find the people are friendly, fair, and welcoming. Get involved in an outdoor club, embark on a hiking trip, or join a sports team in order to meet locals. Daily life in Australia is another thing that you probably are eager to learn more about. Australians work really hard, yet perhaps take their leisure ethic more seriously than their work ethic. They are famous for their relaxed lifestyle, and quality leisure time is a strictly enforced priority. Entertainment in Australia varies, but it is definitely worth mentioning Australia's beer drinking culture, which ranks up with those of Germany, Belgium, and the Czech Republic and Ireland. And keep in mind that the legal drinking age is 18, so don't be surprised if you find much of student social life takes place at the local pub, especially after sporting events. It's common for friends to take turns ordering rounds of beer, which are called shouts, so be prepared. If you accept a beer from someone, the implicit expectation is that you'll return the favor next time. It's important to keep in mind that although alcohol consumption does play an important role in Australian society, binge drinking is dangerous and a significant social problem, so please be responsible in your habits, as this will impact your own health and safety, as well as the reputation of study abroad students in general. In Fiji, entertainment is varied as well. The nightlife in and around the major city of Suva is pretty active, and there are quite a number of night spots which will stay open until the early hours of the morning. There's also a cinema complex in Suva, which houses 6 cinemas, and another in Lautoka, which has 4 cinemas belonging to the same consortium, so you'll still be able to watch all your movies. Around July or August, to coincide with the school holiday, carnivals and beauty pageants are held in various centers around the country, and then the renowned Hibiscus Festival is held in Suva, and this is one of the best times to experience great cuisine and cultural entertainment, in addition to kind of the carnival atmosphere and general exhibitions of the culture that Fiji has to offer. In New Zealand, compared to most other nations, Kiwis or New Zealanders work quite long hours, but they also take their leisure ethic just as seriously as Australians, still achieving one of the highest national rankings for quality of life. With most residents, even those who live in cities, they live just about 20 minutes or so from the coast or the countryside, so it's always easy to slip away into the scenic great outdoors for a quiet stroll, a barbecue, or other similar outdoor activities. The term batch or crib refers to a modest beach property that's passed down among family members and is a particularly iconic representation of the relaxed lifestyle in New Zealand. Lots of families will have a batch or a crib. Entertainment in New Zealand is varied as well, but given its many internationally acclaimed wine regions and excellent beers and vodkas, New Zealand definitely has alcohol consumption woven into its social fabric. The legal drinking age here is also 18, so you'll also find that a lot of student life will take place at the pub. Interpersonal relationships in Australia, Fiji, and New Zealand are something that you'll kind of learn as you go. It's hard to really prepare in a presentation, prepare all of you in a presentation to know what to expect. But keep in mind that in Australia, you may be a little overwhelmed by the Australian accents, but most Australians have the ability to swap quite easily from their strong regional Aussie accents to more foreigner-friendly speech, so don't be too concerned. In terms of the sense of humor in Australia, it can be sometimes a little difficult for foreigners to detect when people are kidding, as Australians do not always break from a joke to clarify it. And also don't be surprised if you hear a lot of self-deprecating humor. Swearing is very common in Australia. Television programs and radio and that type of thing are less censored, and mainstream society is pretty desensitized to words that foreigners could find vulgar. There's also the term yeah, nah, which is super common. It's when responding to basic questions like how are you? So Australians sometimes give multiple answers with immediately conflicting meanings. So if that happens, take the last word in their answer as what they mean. For example, yeah, nah means no, nah, yeah means yes, and yeah, not good means good. So that's something you'll just have to get used to. In Fiji, swearing is not common at all and usually only comes from those who have had a lot of Western exposure, so should pretty much be avoided. Fijians also tend to speak at a softer volume and in a calm tone. It's quite uncommon to hear someone raise their voice because they are emotional, and people usually only shout to signal and catch someone's attention, such as if they're across the street and not in conversation. So the head is considered to be the most sacred part of the body. Therefore, it is inappropriate to touch someone's head. Even patting or stroking a child's head could be construed as rude. And then physical contact is generally not super accepted. There's really no physical contact between people during interactions, and it's generally considered inappropriate for couples to show public displays of affection, especially outside of the cities. And in New Zealand, New Zealanders, you should be warned, are relatively indirect communicators, meaning that they do their best not to create conflict and take careful measures to remain polite throughout discussion. Like in Australia, New Zealanders are often quite self-deprecating and swearing is acceptable. And like in Fiji, the head is considered sacred in Maori culture and should not be touched. So obviously these are broad generalizations. You'll learn a lot more once you get there, but those are just a few interesting points about interpersonal relationships. So housing for students in all three of these countries is fairly similar. Many students in Oceania live at home and attend university in their home state or region. You should expect all housing to be self-catered, meaning no dining halls. So hopefully you'll learn how to cook some new dishes. And student apartments typically have single occupancy bedrooms and shared kitchen/living areas. So that's more or less what you should expect. Meals and restaurants and food in general are one of the most exciting parts of learning a new culture. So I'll just go through country by country. In Australia, the biggest supermarket is called Woolworths. It's a very multicultural nation, so you'll see that reflected in the food. Beef and lamb are very popular, especially at famous Australian barbecues, and eating lunch or dinner at an Australian pub is referred to as a counter lunch or counter meal, and often includes steak and chips or fries, chicken parmesan and chips, or a mixed grill, which is an assortment of mixed meats. Organic and veggie-based foods are also becoming increasingly popular, so vegetarians never fear, along with a revived interest in what's called bush tucker, which is the traditional hunter-gatherer diet of Indigenous Australians. And while tea has traditionally been more common than coffee, there's been a huge coffee and cafe culture that has emerged in Australia over the past few decades. So hopefully you students can enjoy that. In Fiji, the biggest supermarket is Morris Hedstrom, or MH. There aren't many restaurants that provide an international menu, but you'll find that restaurants have a specialty, so you'll see a lot of seafood. However, if you are really craving something from home, most hotels offer plenty of international options because of their foreign clientele. And you can also get a decent meal for under 10 Fijian dollars at many diners and restaurants in Suva, so you don't have to break the bank to have good food. There's lots of fast food outlets that will appeal to people on the go, and if you're missing things like McDonald's or KFC. And then the MHCC, which is a major downtown mall in the central business district of Suva, is home to a variety of food outlets like Fijian food, Indian, Japanese, American, Italian, so you'll have options. And finally, in New Zealand, the biggest supermarket is called Foodstuffs, and because of its agricultural economy, you'll find that cuisine in New Zealand is largely driven by local ingredients and varies by season. The country's two biggest gastronomic influences are British and Indigenous Maori cuisine. So two dishes that are regarded as distinctly Maori are the boil up, which is pork, potatoes, kumara, and dumplings, and pork and puha, which translates to sow thistle, which combine European and Indigenous foods. Also, another distinctive Maori dish is, I believe I might be pronouncing this wrong, but rowena, or Maori bread, which is made with fermented potatoes. So technology in Oceania shouldn't vary too much from your home countries. You should be able to find reliable internet access in cities and populated areas across Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. You'll find that there's less reliable connection in rural or less developed locations, which is pretty typical. Cell service will also be quite reliable throughout those countries. A general recommendation that I have is to look into your home network's data roaming plan, or to purchase a SIM card for one of the major in-country networks. I usually purchase a SIM card for a more reliable connection, but make sure that your phone is unlocked before you go. You can call your service provider, your home service provider, to make sure your phone is unlocked and you can get a new SIM card. In Australia, The main South providers are Telstra, Optus, and Vodafone. In Fiji, Vodafone again, Digicel and Digicel Fiji, and then New Zealand, Spark, Vodafone, and 2 Degrees. So these 3 countries obviously have 3 different currencies. In Australia, the currency is the Australian dollar. Similar to the US dollar, it's divided into 100 cents, and dollar bills come in 5, 10, 20, 50, and 100 denominations. Coins come in $2, $1, 50 cents, 20 cents, 10 cents, and 5 cents. So very similar to the US system. In general, it's most convenient to open an account with one of the larger banks in Australia, such as Commonwealth or ANZ, and obtain an ATM card. These banks are located throughout Australia, so you would be able to withdraw money from the card almost anywhere. Most bank branches are open from Monday through Thursday, 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m., and on Fridays from 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m., except for, of course, public holidays. In all 3 of these countries, not just Australia, you can generally use your own credit cards and debit cards to pay. Just be sure that you call your bank and credit card companies before departure to notify them of the date you'll be traveling. And also in all 3 countries, ATMs are widely available. And just one exception about the credit card rule is that Discover Card is not accepted in Australia. Finally, in Australia, tipping is always optional as Australian workers receive minimum wage and don't need to rely on tips as income. In Fiji, the currency is the Fijian dollar and consists of 100, 50, 20, 10, 5, and $2 notes. Upon arrival, you may want to consider opening a local bank account for the duration of your stay in Fiji. The local banks include ANZ, Westpac, and BSP, and many of them offer student account options. And both ANZ and Westpac have branches and ATMs on University of the South Pacific's main campus, so that's quite convenient. And the general banking hours in Fiji are from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. on weekdays, with some of the major banks opening on Saturdays as well. Tipping is discouraged throughout Fiji unless truly exceptional service has been rendered, so keep that in mind. In New Zealand, the currency comes in New Zealand 100, 50, 20, 10, and $5 notes. Banks are generally open Monday through Friday from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., although some branches of some banks, especially those in main centers and shopping malls, are open on Saturdays. And like in the other 2 countries, you should definitely consider opening a local account upon arrival, especially because most banks, such as Kiwi Bank, so KWI Bank, have special student accounts. And tipping is not expected or required in New Zealand as well. In general, another quick tip is to look into purchasing an International Student ID card, or ISIC card, from STA Travel. It can often get you discounts on travel, movie tickets, and more cultural events. And you should research whether a monthly public transportation pass is available for purchase and whether this might be more cost advantageous than individual fares. Sport and leisure are hugely important in all 3 of these countries. In Australia, you should read up on Australian rules football, or Aussie rules, cricket, and rugby before you leave, and get ready to dive right into the mania and root for a side upon your arrival. The national rugby team is called the Wallabies. Since most cities are along the coast and weather is good for most of the year, water sports like surfing and skiing and things like that are also very popular. In Fiji, rugby is the national sport, but you can enjoy a variety of other sporting activities like tennis, squash, field hockey, soccer, volleyball. The rugby team is called the Flying Fijians, and keep in mind that sporting clubs also welcome new members, and membership into the various USP or University of the South Pacific sporting clubs is open to all students, so that could be a fun opportunity for you to meet locals. New Zealand is crazy about the All Blacks rugby team, which is kind of a national obsession. So you should definitely look into that before you leave. Additional popular sports include cricket, sailing, netball, and golf. And outdoor sports like fishing and hiking are super popular because of the wonderful wildlife in New Zealand, as well as adventure sports like bungee jumping and skydiving. Major holidays and vacation periods are on the Southern Hemisphere calendar. Keep that in mind. So the summer university break is roughly from September to December every year, and the Easter holiday is in April and the winter holiday is in July. So it'll feel a little reversed if you're from the Northern Hemisphere. And then just some quick notes about culture shock. Culture shock is normal and it probably will happen to you. Not only is culture shock normal, but reverse culture shock is quite normal when you return. So just know that your friends, your family, and ISEP, me, your student services officer, your home ISEP coordinator at your home university, your host ISEP coordinator at your host university, we're all here for you to support you. We want you to have a great time. And just know that whatever you're feeling during that culture shock period before you kind of adapt is normal and you'll get through it. And once you do, you'll have an even better time. And then these are some reflections from past ISEP students. I'm not going to read through them in the interest of time, but definitely take a look when we send out this presentation. All right, so moving on to academics. So as I had mentioned, the academic calendar is based on the Southern Hemisphere calendar and generally runs from February to November. The first semester typically begins in January and ends in April, and the second semester typically begins in late July and ends in November. In Oceania, you do not use the term school or college to refer to the university level of education. Rather, you simply say university or uni. So that's just a local terminology. In Australia, most bachelor's degrees take 3 years to complete, and typically Australian students complete their general education requirements in high school. So upon arrival at university, they've already decided on a major and start taking major courses immediately. The term course is used to refer to an entire program that leads to a degree. So for example, a course is the same as a Bachelor of Arts, whereas a class or subject is referred to as a unit. And then instead of saying grade, in Australia, they say mark. In Fiji, the educational structure is divided into primary, secondary, and higher education. And you'll be relieved to know that the primary language of instruction is English, although many schools also offer Fijian, Hindi, and Chinese language and culture classes as part of their primary school curriculum. Students can take advantage of Fiji's position in the Pacific with courses on topics such as marine studies, marine biology, tourism, geography, environmental science, things like that you might not be able to find at home. And courses and exams at the University of the South Pacific are all conducted in English. In New Zealand, there are 4 types of schools in the higher education system: universities, institutes of technology, and polytechnics, Maori centers of tertiary teaching and learning, and private learning establishments. So all of ISEP's New Zealand universities are universities, and we have one Institute of Technology / Polytechnic Institute, which is NMIT. Keep in mind that undergraduate degrees take 3 to 4 years to complete, and some more terminology is that a paper is the term generally used for what you may at home think of as an individual course or class within a degree program. And a course in New Zealand means a degree program, like in Australia, like a bachelor. And it can also be kind of used interchangeably with the term program. In Australia, you'll find that the majority of students live at home and attend universities in their home state. In all universities, students have substantial control of the student unions, councils, and athletic clubs, and you can expect compulsory fees that support these activities and are collected from students by the universities. You should expect a very multicultural student body and really robust international student associations. In Fiji, there are 12 member countries that conjointly own USP, and the main campus and headquarters is based in Suva, Fiji. So keep in mind that these 12 member countries will contribute their own distinct cultures to life on campus. So that's pretty exciting. It's a really multicultural environment. International students have many opportunities to participate in extracurriculars, and there are more than 15 student organizations available. So the University of the South Pacific Student Association, or USPA, brings together international and local students for cultural and social activities. So you should definitely look into the USPA, especially because the International Students Association is affiliated with the USPA and organizes international student activities. Campus Life and the Office of Study Abroad will also be responsible for activities on campus that are free to all students, and departments organize poetry slams, movie nights, and kind of lunchtime seminars and public lectures that will be open to you as an ISEP student. And finally, in New Zealand, student life includes unique disciplines such as Maori studies and the science of wine. And you'll find on college campuses in New Zealand everything from a fast-paced urban environment to the pristine outdoors. There's something for everyone. So for exams and papers, you'll find that Australia and New Zealand typically have lectures and tutorials that total about 15 hours a week, and the rest of the time you're meant to study and research on your own. So the Australian and New Zealand education systems, that means generally emphasize independent study over class time, attendance, and participation. And for these reasons, independence and self-discipline are very important in keeping up academically. It's quite common for grades to be based solely on a few papers and a final exam, and essays have to be very well written and academic, not reflection papers. It's recommended that students talk with their professors about what's expected for their first essay, and professors will often offer to review drafts as well. So in Fiji, classes are based on the British system of lectures and tutorials. Tutorials are a time when students can ask questions and view presentations, and you'll find that nearly all research is done in the library because there are limited reference materials that can be checked out. And the grading system in Australia and New Zealand and Fiji, again, kind of differs country to country. It's important to note that in Australia, instead of beginning with a 100% in a unit, you begin with 0 points and earn points for correct answers. So in that case, earning a 75 is actually pretty good. And in Fiji, course grades are assessed continually on the basis of assignments, tests, discussions, and a final exam. And the grading scale ranges from A+ to E, E meaning a very weak performance or failure to complete the course to the satisfaction of the examiner. And in New Zealand, grading scales differ slightly between institutions, but typically they're based on a letter scale as well, with A+ as the highest and F as the lowest. A C is the lowest passing grade and is equivalent to about a 50%, and failing grades include D, E, and F, with a Q given for failing to meet mandatory course requirements, such as showing up to class, for example, or major assignments. So the credit system of each country and the course load you can expect differs. In Australia, a normal course load is 3 to 4 classes or units per semester, and the number of credits per unit is determined based on time spent in private study, group work, etc., in addition to class time with the instructors. So just keep in mind that the necessary work and total number of hours required for each unit will vary and doesn't directly relate to the number of credits the unit is assigned. In order to satisfy your student visa condition, you must maintain a full-time enrollment with at least 18 units per semester. You're also required to be enrolled in at least one face-to-face course per study period, although ISEP's requirements are higher than one. In Fiji, students will take 3 to 4 courses per semester and can expect to spend 16 to 20 hours in class, depending on their year and course of study. Students need to attend all tutorials as they're assessed and contribute to about 5% of the final grade. And note that if students do not attend at least 60% of all of their tutorials and practicals, they will be deemed ineligible to sit for the final exam and not pass the class. Classwork and assignments throughout the semester will account for about 40 to 50% towards your final grade, and the final exam might count for as much as 50 to 60%. And in order to meet your student visa requirements, you must maintain enrollment in a full-time in-person course load. And note that if you have not attended up to 80% of each course you registered for, it is considered a breach of the study permit regulations by Fiji immigration. So you have to go to class. Everywhere you have to go to class, but really you have to go to class in Fiji. In New Zealand, most institutions assign each course a credit or point value, which varies between each institution, but you can expect to take 4 courses per semester at the university level. And like in Australia, the number of credits a course is worth does not necessarily derive from the number of contact hours in class. You'll find that many business and humanities courses consist of 3 hours in lecture and 1 in a tutorial. And then science and creative arts courses have laboratory or practical components that are usually 3 hours in length, in addition to time spent in lectures each week. So like the other countries, in order to maintain your student visa requirement, you have to maintain enrollment in a full-time in-person course load. Registration is the same everywhere because it's organized by ISEP. ISEP students generally enroll after attending classes for a few weeks in consultation with their assigned academic advisor and host ISEP coordinator. You will probably not be expected to pre-register, but definitely check your pre-departure information on your ISEP portal just in case your university has any specific terms that you need to be familiar with. And only classes that students register for officially will appear on their transcripts. So keep that in mind when you're counting credits. Interaction with professors. Our ISEP students in Oceania report that professors are generally approachable, but do remember to be proactive about asking for help. So that means reaching out to professors over email, attending office hours, and also remember that your host ISEP coordinator will be your biggest ally if you need extra support. So never hesitate to reach out to them or to me, your student services officer at ISEP. Moving on to health and safety, which is super important. So you can find plenty of health and safety resources in your ISEP portal under the While Abroad tab, and definitely review those resources now before you leave. Some of the health and safety information there includes phone numbers for medical attention, mental health services, and emergency situations, and you should put those numbers in your phone now so you don't forget. The first thing that we recommend to familiarize yourself with health and safety resources is to review the ISEP country handbook for your host country, which should have already been sent to you. If it hasn't been, then please reach out to me, your student services officer. Definitely also watch the ISEP Health and Safety Pre-Departure Orientation video, which again has been emailed to you. And if you want further details, you can search for ISEP's Health and Safety Policy on our website. If you will need access to regular medication during your study abroad, please coordinate with your doctor now in your home country to figure out a plan. You'll really have 2 options. One is to bring a full supply on your study abroad, and 2 is to coordinate with a local provider ahead of time to ensure that you can get your prescription filled in Australia, Fiji, or New Zealand. When you arrive, your host coordinator will give an on-site orientation that is mandatory to attend and will include important health and safety information, as well as information about registering for courses and life abroad. Definitely go to that. And finally, in the case of an emergency, during business hours, please contact your host coordinator, but after business hours, you can call the ISEP 24/7 emergency line. But keep in mind that is only for true emergencies, not just kind of inconveniences like trouble registering for courses. And then health insurance is another super important health and safety topic for all of you. As you know, all ISEP students must enroll in health insurance through the ISEP portal. There are some differences by country though. So Fiji students must enroll in the full ISEP health insurance policy plus the MER, so that's medical evacuation and repatriation policy. Students going to Australia and New Zealand, however, only have to enroll in ISEP's MER policy because of other national insurance requirements for their visas. If you visit a healthcare center and plan to use your ISEP insurance, make sure that you have your ISEP insurance card. You should print out and carry this health insurance ID card in your wallet at all times. You won't receive a physical insurance card in the mail, so you have to print it out from your ISEP portal. And definitely keep it in your wallet because you just never know when you'll need it and if you'll have internet access or even your phone on hand to pull up a digital copy. If you need to visit the hospital using ISEP insurance, keep in mind that you may need to pay up front and then file a claim later. And if this happens, you may need to pay in cash. So remember to save all medical documentation and receipts, as this is the only way you can be reimbursed when filing a claim with ISEP insurance. So circling back to the visa requirements for Australia and New Zealand students, in Australia, you will be required to purchase the Australian Health Insurance Overseas Student Health Cover, or OSHC, in order to obtain a student visa. You'll receive OSHC enrollment information from your host institution, and your host institution will only then issue your confirmation of enrollment, or COE, after you have enrolled in the OSHC. So that's very important. And then in New Zealand, all ISEP participants must purchase insurance that meets the New Zealand Ministry of Education's minimum guidelines, and students will need to consult with their host university for policy recommendations and enrollment procedures. And somewhat similarly, students will not be allowed to register for classes until they have submitted proof of sufficient insurance coverage to their host university in New Zealand. Personal safety is super important in general. Our best advice is to use common sense. Always be aware of your surroundings, travel in pairs or small groups rather than alone, especially at night, and always pay attention to security warnings and on-site orientation briefings. There are also some health and safety quick tips that are specific to Oceania. In Australia, in the event of an emergency, dial 000 to speak with emergency services. Once connected, you can request ambulance, fire, or police assistance. From a mobile phone, you can also text 112 to speak to a 000 operator. Keep in mind that Australia is home to a ton of incredible animals, but you will maybe prefer to avoid some of them. A good rule of thumb is to always follow advisory signs and don't approach unfamiliar animals, even if they are cute. Bushfires can occur in Australia's bushland, typically in the warmer months of the year, and they do pose a risk to travelers and property, so it's recommended to check local conditions and reschedule trips within a bushfire radius. In Fiji, in the event of an emergency, dial 917. Keep in mind too that beaches don't typically have lifeguards or hazard warnings, so it's best to take precaution in the water and look out for hidden currents and riptides. And just in general, don't take unnecessary risks in remote areas because transportation to the nearest hospital can be scarce. And finally, in New Zealand, in the event of an emergency, dial 111. You can send updates about your location and travel movements via text to the number 7233, which spells SAFE. These details are kept in a central database and can be accessed by police if necessary. So that's a great tool for travelers. And then, of course, take advantage of the great outdoors, but also take time to learn about where you're going and to seek advice from locals, especially the Department of Conservation or DOC Visitor Information Center. And finally, the last section, know before you go, or second to last section rather. Packing is very stressful, but it's important to be strategic. Apparel needs will vary depending on your host city, so keep that in mind and try and, if you need a jacket where you're going, just pack one jacket. You don't need 6 jackets. Think about clothes that you can use in tons of different situations. And if you don't wear something all the time at home, you're not going to wear it abroad, so don't waste space in your suitcase. Also, make sure that you have the toiletries, medications, and electrical needs, such as plugs for specific countries that you need. And I always would recommend printing paper copies of important documents to keep in your carry-on, to keep on you during your travel. Check the pre-departure information in your ISEP portal for more specific tips. And, things in the pre-departure packet include, for example, if you need to bring sheets and towels. So those are things you're going to want to know before you pack a suitcase. And then things to do before you go. Remember to pay your program fee 30 days before your start date. Make sure that you know the date and location of your host site orientation. Make electronic copies of all your important documents and upload them to a secure server. Check your data plan with your home phone provider. Or look into international plans, and then write down the addresses of where you're going and keep it on you, because you never know what the Wi-Fi or cell data situation will be when you land. And finally, keeping in touch. definitely determine before you leave how you plan to stay in touch with family and friends back home. I always recommend WhatsApp, Signal, Zoom, FaceTime. All of these are Wi-Fi based platforms, so you don't incur data roaming fees or use up, your data for the month. It's super easy to stay in touch with your family using those tools. Remember too to contact your family upon your safe arrival so that they don't get stressed. And then importantly, connect with us, connect with other ISEP students at this Facebook group for accepted students, which you should have been emailed the link to. Connect with ISEP on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. We love to hear from you. We love hearing about your adventures. So thanks so much for listening to this. Always reach out if you have any questions, and safe travels.